Okay, so introducing the class, 9-week class for 10 chapters, and the last chapter is 3 psukim. So that makes it basically one chapter a week. That's the idea. It's going to be faster. The pace is going to have to be faster than what we did previously. I'm a little ambivalent about that, but I want to cover the Megillah. We're not going to cover it by Purim, as is obvious, but we'll have, I think, six of the 9 whatever chapters. So we'll have most of the story done by Purim, but a good chunk will be done after Purim. So I hope that's good for everybody. That's what's up. Yeah, that's, I think, what I have to say about this class. So, so let's begin. A slight background. The Jews are in exile. They're exiled by the Babylonians. That's to say, the southern kingdom of Yehuda, right? Nebuchadnezzar destroys the temple, exiles the Jews in different stages, and according to the Jewish chronology, we were allowed by the king before Achashverosh, whose name is also Koresh, and there's names that repeat themselves, which makes it confusing. And when I say according to Jewish chronology, there's a whole mess in terms of the chronology and in terms of how we measure the exile, the 7-year exile of Bavel. So in any case, the Jews are towards the end of the 70 years, and the king before Achashverosh allows the Jews to go back to Israel. Some do, not many, and they're allowed to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, but that runs into problems. That stops. Achashverosh takes over from a time when that stopped. Okay, and it apparently doesn't begin again till after Achashverosh, till Daryavish, his son. That's just some of the historical background. As I said, it's a little confused. The most important thing for us to know is that the Jews are towards the end of Galut Bavel here. Most Jews, well, pretty much all Jews are living within the empire, the Persian Empire, which stretches from Hodu, India, to Ethiopia. So almost all Jews are in this empire, which makes the threat of annihilation all that much more problematic, right? Because there's nobody likely to survive. No Jews likely to survive. Yeah, so that's the story. You should also note from the beginning, sort of a giveaway, but you should note the tone of farce and mockery in the Megillah of the Persian Empire. It's there's a lot of irony going on, sort of a parody of Persian power and splendor. So keep your eye out for that. It's very clear, especially in this chapter. It'll be clear on and off different things, and we'll try to point it out as we go. My strategy is, because we're going to cover on average about 20 psukim a week, which is a lot, and it's more than we did last time, is to run through quickly a lot of the psukim and focus on certain issues, certain psukim and not others. So unless you have a burning question going through on one of the psukim that we're sort of running through, I'm going to ask you to save it. You can write a note to me online, or you can save it till afterwards and let me know. And if it's something that I think we should share with the class, we'll do it in the next class. Okay, ready? Ready? I guess so. I didn't hear no, so that's that. In the Gemara, you've probably heard from me or from other people, shtika kehoda'ah dami, which means when you're quiet, it's as if you agree. So watch it next time you be quiet, and you can agree to a lot of things. Okay. Yeah. So v'yeh Achashverosh hamolech mehodu v'adku sheva v'esrim Umea Medina. So it was in days of Achashverosh. That was Achashverosh, or he was Achashverosh, that ruled from India to Ethiopia, 127 countries. Now, Hodevat Kush, I translate the way what I think is Peshat. There's disagreement in the Gemara, but we'll leave it at that. I'm going to ask you right off, though, to look for a textual question here. And I'm going to ask you to tell me what words seem unnecessary in this pasuk. And while you're thinking, don't blurt it out yet, to give everybody a chance to think. I just want to let you know that Megillat Esther is very late in the Tanakh, and therefore a lot of the grammar, especially the vocabulary, is things that you will not see in other books in the Tanakh. There is not a few, I mean, there's quite a few words that are Persian-based, right? This is taking place in Persia. The Jews are speaking Persian the way many of us speak English. And Mordechai and Esther, being the writers, include Persian words. So that will be a challenge for us, but it's nothing that we can't overcome. Anyway, what words are extra over here in this pasuk?
Achashverosh.
Perfect, very excellent. Yeah, Achashverosh, right? It could have said more concisely, right? That's all that's necessary. And Chazal pick up on that. I asked you to look at Rashi. The part of Rashi I was really interested in is the middle Rashi. Those of you who have a copy in front of you, and you should always, ideally, you should have Mikra Gdolot of Esther. Sfaria doesn't have the Biur Gra, so if anybody was trying to get it online, it's not there. It might be on Ala Torah. It's another site. Anyway, so it's good to have an actual written copy. In any case, Rashi says, Hu birisha'o mitchilato vad sofo. That when it's emphasizing Hu Achashverosh, it's telling us that he's complete. He's one unit, right? Because we might think of him as a wishy-washy guy, and he is. Wishy-washy guy means that he's good and he's bad, right? So Rashi, echoing Chazal, say no, he's bad from beginning to end. And I want you to remember this because that is not an obvious thing at all. I think Chazal, the rabbis, are making a point here, an important point that we'll see throughout, that Achashverosh is really the villain and not Haman. Even though Haman is clearly a more evil person. But as far as the villain of the story, it's Achashverosh. That's what I think Rashi sets us up for from the beginning. Achashverosh translate to good leader. What the rabbis do is they play on the word Rosh, that and they compare him to Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar obviously is a bad king. Rosh is the head. That's. But in any case, let's go on. Pasuk Bet biyamim ahem keshevet hamelach Chashverosh al kisei malchuto asher b'Shushan bira. And you can have here also. I've mentioned more than once that a pasuk is not a sentence. A pasuk can be sometimes 2 sentences or 3 even, and sometimes it takes several psukim to complete a sentence. This is what we have in pasuk Bet. In fact, Aleph really is sort of preface to pasuk Bet also. It's not really a complete sentence. So let's read the whole sentence. B'yamim ahem keshevet hamelach Chashverosh al kisei malchuto asher b'Shushan bira. בשנת 3 למלכו, עשה משתה לכל שריו ועבדיו וחיל פרס ומדי, הפרטמים שרי המדינות לפניו. Okay, so that's pretty much a sentence. So in those days, right? When the king Ahasuerus was sitting on the throne of his kingdom that was in Shushan, the fortress city, sort of like an acropolis. Those of you who've been to Athens or know the idea, right? I think also in Jerusalem at some point there was some sort of thing. It's an elaborate fortress city, right? So that's what a bira is. And so he was seated in Shushan Abira. There's all sorts of speculation among the commentaries why Shushan. What's clear, it seems not to be the seat of government prior to Achashverosh. There's also discussion about how he became king, right? Rashi on the previous pasuk, right? Who says Hamolech, who reigned, right? Rashi finds that word extra also. Why who reigned? Obviously, he's the king, so he reigns. So Rashi over there says Shemalach Me'atzmo. And apparently, according to the historical record, apparently the king we think was Achashverosh. Xerxes took the kingdom away from his brother. But in commentaries, there's speculation that it was much more than that he took it from the Assyrians, whatever. Anyways, you can look through the literature if you're interested. But in any case, what seems to be clear is Shushan is a new capital. That's where he establishes himself. And at that time, in the third year of his reign, he made a party for all of his ministers and all of his servants. The army of Persia and Madai, where there were two kingdoms who came together, Media and Persia, Hapartamim, V'sarei Medinot Lefanav. And also, the Partamim is a Persian word, right? Type of officer, type of minister, as well as the word we have in Hebrew, Sarei Medinot Lefanav. All these different people were in front of him, right? So he had the cream of the imperial society come to this giant party in year three. It's fairly obvious why year three and not before that. He wanted to consolidate. He was consolidating his reign, right? Got his act together, developed this great wealth, presumably more than his forebears, the kings that came before him. Right at that point, he's ready to show off and to make a statement about his absolute power over the empire. So that's a setup. Haroto, and we'll continue the setup of the party for the next several psukim. Haroto et osher kvod malchuto v'yikar tifel dudato yamim rabim shmone umeat yom. So in his showing the wealth of the glory of his kingdom and the splendor, the yakar tiferet gulato, the splendor of his greatness for many days, right? That's what the party was about, 180 days. So it's an interesting number, right? Sometimes the Tanakh rounds off numbers. Essentially what comes out, so when the Meforshim say, is there was the whole dry season, right? And all the days that he could be sure there'd be no rain, right? So it was basically a year's party that he could do not only indoors but also outdoors, which even in Persia or in Rome is sort of an outrageous thing, right? So he had a party for 180 days. למגדול ועד קטן משתי שבעת ימים בחצר גינת ביתן המלך. Okay, and when those days were finished, right? So the king made for all the people that were living in the fortress of Shushan, from the great to the small, a party of 7 days in the courtyard of the garden attached to the palace of the king. Bitan also is a Persian word, not exactly clear what it's referring to. Okay, so continuing the description of the party, Chur, Karpas, Utchelet Achuz, Dehavle Boots, Vagaman, Agle Kesef, Vamudei Shesh, Mitot Zahav Vekesef, Alitzpat, Bahat Veshesh, Vedar, Vesoharet. Okay, so there is hangings. Again, this is not the sort of decorations we're used to, but there seems to be cloth hanging, right? Think of like a tent, right? So instead of just one big tent, there are things hanging in different places. So karpas apparently is some sort of white fabric. Tchelet is blue fabric. I'm sorry, chur is white fabric. Karpas is green. Tchelet is what we know as blue fabric that are grabbed by or held up by really cords of boots. Boots is linen, v'argaman and purple wool, al galilei kesef on poles of silver and pillars of shesh. Shesh is marble. Mitot zahav v'kesef. Mitot, as you probably know from pictures of Rome, and also the Haggadah is based on such a the idea of haseva on Leil HaSeder, that we recline is based on people eating not on chairs as we do, but on mitot, on beds. Okay, so as it was in among the Jews in Eretz Yisrael and as it was by the Romans in Rome, so too in Paras they would recline. The wealthy people would recline when they ate at parties, at banquets, and so that's what he set up for them. Mitot zahav v'kesef, beds of silver and gold. I imagine, though I don't know, but I imagine there's some sort of padding on it that's not described. And it wouldn't, though no one says it wouldn't be outrageous for Achashverosh to be concerned about the ostentatiousness and not the comfort of his guests. Although we can see in terms of the wine that it seems like that there is an interest in people being happy. In any case, so this was on a floor of different, again, shesh is marble. They say bahat is alabaster, mother of pearl. So haret, I don't remember what that is. Different building materials that are very valuable. So here's the next part, and I want to focus a little bit on the next two psukim. So we're going to slow it down a little bit. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. Dar is probably mother of pearls, or like something similar.
Sorry,
Dar.
who's the mother? Sorry. Oh.
Mother of pearls, like
mother of pearl.
the inlay in
right,
shells.
right, yeah, right. The one I wasn't sure of was Soharet, but
sorry.
yeah, but that's fine. No worries. Zayin v'hashkot bechlei zahav v'kelim mekelim shonim v'yayin malchut rav ki ad hamelech. So probably all of you have an association with kelim shonim, right? What's kelim shonim? No? Do you not have an association? Uh-oh. You don't listen to Megillah? So
What, the Beit HaMikdash kelim?
yeah. So do you know why I expect you to have an association with that? Mekelim shonim. Does that sound familiar? Right?
The sad?
Sorry? Yeah. There's a way you sing Megillat Esther, and it breaks in a couple places for the tune of Eicha, at least according to the Ashkenazi custom. Okay, and Kelim Shonim is one of the places, the first place. And why the translation doesn't indicate it, but there's a tradition that the Kelim Shonim, these different vessels, are vessels of the Beit HaMikdash. We'll see Rashi in a second that's not pshat, but let's just translate it first. Read it and translate. Vashkot bechlei zahav kelim mekelim shonim v'yan malchut rav ki ad hamelech. So the drink was in vessels of gold and vessels of different types, and royal wine, much royal wine, according to the hand of the king, meaning with the generosity of the king. So, before we focus a little more, I just want to read the next verse as well. Vashtia kedat enones ki chen yisad hamelech al kol rav beito nasot kiltzom ish ve'ish. And the drinking was according to the law. There was no forcing, because that's the way the king set it up towards or upon all the heads of his house, meaning all the people in charge of serving drinks, to do according to the will of each and every person. Okay, so first of all, in terms of this kelim shonim, right? So it's not clear that there's really any textual question. So Rashi, take a look at Rashi on Chet. No, I'm sorry, on Zion. Shonim, he says, Meshunim zemezeh. They're all different from each other, right? Now, as we want to know, what does it mean different, right? Rashi just wants to explain, what does it mean? What's the intention, right? What's this word coming to say, just on a shot level? There's no problem with it, but I want to know what it means. So Rashi says they're different from each other, right? In other words, that would show Achashverosh's wealth by, normally when you buy glasses, you buy sets, right? We all buy sets of 8, sets of 12, right? And part of that's for uniformity, but the other reason is it's cheaper that way. So Achashverosh is buying all these different unique glasses, and he's making all these unique glasses, right? Which costs more. Is exactly the point. Yeah. Before I go on, I just want to make one quick point about the previous part that we ran through, and that's for you to notice the order of the parties, right? The party of all the officers of the empire was first for 180 days, and then after that there was a smaller party for everyone in the city, right, including the regular people, for 7 days. There's a discussion in the Gemara whether that was a smart thing to do or a stupid thing to do. It's interesting. So it's something for you to ponder, right? Again, sort of setting the tone and going back to what we spoke about before about Achashverosh being this unusual character. So that there's this ambivalence about Achashverosh, not just on the moral perspective, but also about his intelligence, right? Or his wisdom. Was he a wise king? Was he a stupid king? Right? And there's ambivalence because it's sort of both, right? Each time we're trying to get a hold of Achashverosh, what we see is he's this and that. We're all this and that on some level, but much more than normal average people. So in any case, let's go back to where we were, right? Kelim Shonim. Now, I asked you to look at the Gra. I don't know if anybody had a chance, but the Gra in a different place basically asked there's one big question you should be asking about all the verses up till now. What's the big overriding question you should be asking? No one?
No food.
Sorry, no food. That's interesting. Yeah, it's true. The food hasn't been mentioned. But for Jews, that's a big question. Right? They say Jewish weddings, like there's lots of food and very little drink, and the goyim get all upset. And by goyish weddings, there's not so much food, but a lot of drinks. So I guess there's a tradition for that. But yeah, someone was saying who
Why do any of these details matter?
who said that? Zelda? No. Ita, all right. Yeah, why do we care, right? We're going on and on about this party. This is Tanakh, right? This is not like a fairy tale story that we're just, once upon a time, there is a fairy princess in a beautiful castle with 2 towers and so on and so on and so forth, right? So that's what the Gra asks. He asks it repeatedly, and each time his answer is that it's showing us how God acts within, normal events, and that God pushes certain things to happen. So I'll read a little bit in the Gra. I don't know if any of you have it in front of you, on Pasuk Chet, and I'm reading from the middle. He says, "U'mesaper lanu hakatuv איך הקדוש ברוך הוא מסבב סיבובים ומחפך ליבו של אדם כדי לעשות נס." So he says that it's explaining, the text is showing us how Hashem makes things happen and uproots or switches around the heart of a person in order to make a miracle. Now, we haven't reached any action yet, really. The action is going to happen when, as you know, when he asks Vashti to come before the servants and she refuses, right? The question is, how is that set up, right? So, clearly, one of the things that's being emphasized here is Ahasuerus's show of total power. And as no one's seen anything like this. This is, truly outstanding. We've seen empires, but this goes beyond anything they've seen. I read recently about Hitler, Yimach Shemo, that he felt that his competition was ancient Rome. That he was, it was a competition. There was no, he didn't care about any other countries or France, England. No, Rome. That's the competition. So here at this time, this is before Rome, right? There's no competition. This is greater than Egypt. This is certainly greater than Babylon. The greatest show on earth, right? And he's at the top, and there's no competition. So continues the ground. Sharei kavanato hayita la'asot ratzon hapachot shebepechotin. Right. So on one level, he's showing his magnanimity by saying he's right. We talked about the wine. Everybody gets to do what they want with the wine. ואחר כך גזר על אשתו שהייתה בת מלך להביאה אומה שלא ברצונה. And then afterwards, he starts by, the Grab, in saying what he's saying, is also pointing out the contradictions in Ahasuerus's personality, right? So he does whatever the smallest people in Shushan want, on the one hand, and yet the second in command, or the second most important person in his empire, his wife, right? He totally disgraces. Right, and he decrees on his wife, who was, according to our tradition, the daughter of a king, and even though in other records it's not clear, who else would a king marry besides the daughter of another king? Right, that was certainly in Europe what was done. In any case, this very important pedigreed woman to bring her naked against her will. Right, that's a tradition. We'll see when we get to it. But in case the Gra goes with that tradition, and afterwards, because she destroyed or broke his haughty spirit, so that's why he killed her. Because he was showing the glory of his kingdom, and his power and his wealth, and then even his wife, which on a personal level would normally follow her husband's decrees, her husband's will, she who we'd expect to be the first one to listen to him, did not listen to him. Right? So this is a tremendous letdown for Ahasuerus in this context. And so what's being shown here is just how big a thing it was. And obviously the deposition of Vashti is not only going to set up the possibility that Esther is going to become the queen, but also the sword, it brings Haman to power, right? And it brings a certain style of leadership to Persia, to Achashverosh. Now, the Gra points something else out, which is based on Chazal, both the Gemara and the Midrash. So it says ish ve'ish, right? That he wanted to do Kratzon ish ve'ish. Now, on a Peshat level, this is normal Hebrew, right? There's no problem with that. But on Drash level, we're going to see a lot of psukim in Esther that sound like other psukim, either in the Megillah itself or in other books. And I want you to be looking to open your ears for that, to be looking for that as we go along. So here, I don't expect you to know unless you saw the Gra. Anybody have an idea what ish ve'ish might be hinting to? No? Okay, like I said, I don't expect you to get that, but the two other people that are described as ish in this Megillah. Who would they likely be? Right? The other stars, right? Who are the other stars? Right? So Mordechai, what's Mordechai's nickname? No one remembers? Ish Yehudi. Ish Yehudi, right? The Jewish man, right? And Haman is later called, he's also called Ish Sav Oyev, right? That's Esther calls him the enemy and the distressing and enemy man, right? So they're both described as Ish. So Chazal say that's fascinating, right? Because here he wants to do the will of every person, right? Again, setting up the sort of internal contradictions that exist in Achashverosh's personality. Because, right, he's actually going to want to do the will of Haman, and he's actually going to want to do the will of Mordechai, even though there can't be two greater opposites than Mordechai and Haman, right? So the Gra points out how it's that contradiction is already in place. Again, echoing Chazal, but the Gra brings it out, I think, very nicely. I mean, maybe we'll just take a quick look at the Gra, even though I see we're not halfway through, and we're over halfway through in the time. So he quotes the Midrash, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Ata amarta la'asot kratzon ish ve'ish, ani eten shnei anashim shtimale ratzonam. You want to do like the will of each man. I'm going to give you two men, and you're going to fulfill their wills. And then Mordechai veHaman, right? So the seeds of the story are being planted from the first chapter. Okay. I think we can go on unless there are any questions about Zion and Chet or comments. Okay. Gam Vashti Amalka. Okay, so here, I mean, those of you who've been with me before know that I always encourage you to look at how people are called. Right, I just mentioned about Mordechai's nickname being Ish Yehudi. It could have been a million things. Right? It could have been Ben whatever. It could have been Sar Hamelech, all sorts of things. But the name that's repeated more often than not is Ish Yehudi, or at least the appellation that's most familiar to us. In any case, there's a lot of play with Vashti's name. Okay, and at the end, after we see a bunch of them, I'll tell you what the Malbim says, or you can, before that, you'll tell me what you think. So pay attention in general, but pay attention to Vashti's name. Pasuk Tet, Gam Vashti Amalka, so too Vashti the queen, right? By the way, this is the default, right, in Hebrew, right? David HaMelech, right? We don't say HaMelech David. So this is the default, okay? In any case, גם ושתי המלכה עשתה משתי נשים בית המלכות אשר למלך אחשוורוש. So too did Vashti the queen make a party of women in the house of the monarchy that belonged to the king Ahasuerus, right? Interesting the way it's setting up the power dynamic, right? That the house belongs to him, and it's as if he's allowing her to make the party there. B'yom hashvi'i ketov lev. People ask, by the way, what was the point of her party? It's sort of unusual, but we'll put that to the side. ביום השביעי כתוב לב המלך ביין אמר למהומן ביסתה הבונה בקתה ואבקתה זיתה וקרקס שבעה הסרסים משרתים את פני המלך אחשוורוש. So again, this is part one of the sentence. On the seventh day of the second party, there's one thing I want to tell you first. It's not that important, but it's too cute to not to speak over. Right, the story about Ahasuerus allowing everybody to drink according to their will. Right, so it seems like what's that about? Right, Rashi speaks to it. If you saw Rashi, I think did I ask you to look at Rashi there? Yeah. So Rashi says because in some places people like it's like drinking parties, and there's a lot of pressure, or even you're forced to drink a whole mug of beer, for example, and not everyone wants to do that because you can get drunk very easily, right? So that's not untypical of a drinking party, and perhaps even a royal drinking party. This party was different. But as far as the everybody getting to choose their wine, apparently this was unusual in Persia. There's a book by a man named Yehuda Landi, very good book about the historical and cultural background of the Purim story. And he talks about Archimedes, the Greek playwright, speaking about how the Persians were known to be horrible because they'd force you to drink their really disgusting sweet wine. So apparently there was a whole thing that was really gross, and they would, it was like the bane of the world. But so Ahasuerus wanted people to be impressed and to like him, so that's one thing he made sure not to force on them. Anyway, I thought it's just a fun detail. Anyway, so on the seventh day, right, when the king his heart was feeling good because of the wine, right? He's at least tipsy, right? It's not clear he's drunk but he's certainly tipsy. He's under the influence. So he said, we're not going to go through the names again, right? The various advisors, these sarisim that service the face of the king Ahasuerus. Sarisim literally means eunuch, even though it's often used for ministers, but it could well be sarisim, men that were in charge of the harem, the women of his entourage. These were the ones he chose. Lehavi et Vashti Malka לפני המלך בכתר מלכות להראות העמים והשרים את יופייה כי טובת מראה היא. Okay, so he told them to bring Vashti the queen, still the same, in front of the king with a crown of the monarchy to show the peoples and the ministers her beauty, because she was a beautiful appearance. Okay, and Tovat Mareh is something we want to pay attention to as well for later in the story when it describes Esther somewhat differently. Okay, so we all know, right? We mentioned it before. That Chazal feel that he wanted her to come without any clothes, right? How did that? What's their indication? Is there indication in the verse that that's the case?
The Keter Malchut, I guess she always wears the crown.
Yeah, exactly. Good. Yefet. Beketer Malchut would seem to be, unnecessary. Either she wears it or she doesn't wear it. Whatever she does is that's the deal. Now, it doesn't have to be that, and it could be that she let her hair down, so to speak, at the women's party. Um, but it's an official function. Presumably, that's what would be the case, right? Moreover, right, he's not bringing her. The reason he's bringing her in is to show off her beauty, right? So and in drunken state. So it's not a far stretch that this might be the case. Of course, it's a tremendous disgrace to the queen, right? Which again is sort of showing the tension that exists in Achashverosh's personality. You get him drunk and he becomes like a lunatic. Tov. Okay. Pasuk Yud Bet. ותמן המלכה ושתי לבוא דבר המלך אשר ביד הסרסים ויקצוף המלך מאוד וחמתו בערה בו. Okay, so the Queen Vashti, right, you'll notice it's switched around, right, refused to come by the word of the king through the hand of the eunuchs, of the ministers, and the king waxed very angry and his rage was burning inside of him, right? Clearly, again, he's had 187 days to lead up to the conclusion, the final conclusion. I assume this was somewhat spontaneous. I don't think he planned this, but this seems to be the final day, and he's going to make the grand finale. And it could be that this is how he envisions the grand finale, and instead of being this smash success, right, it becomes this scandal that she refuses, and so obviously it's like everything he's done is going down the drain. 187 days, right? All this money spent, right? All down the drain. So he's furious on the one hand. On the other hand, right? What kind of a crime is it to refuse to come, if you're the queen, to come naked in front of, especially if it's naked, but even without? What kind of a crime is it not to agree to such a request, right? And again, Landy says that when parties got drunk, that was a sign for queens to leave, not for queens to arrive. It was not unusual for parties to get out of hand, but that's when queens were protected, right, instead of made vulnerable. So, right, we have a sense of nahafachu, right, of things being reversed already from the beginning, right? It's not only later that this happens. Again, Esther and Mordechai, who wrote the Megillah, according to tradition, they're creating a tone here. It's not just content, but in Tanakh, there's also a tone. There's also a sense of what we're hearing, creating a sort of texture, a literary texture. Okay, Tov, Yud Gimel, ויאמר המלך לחכמים יודע העיתים כי כן דבר המלך לפני כל יודע דת ודין. So again, it's going to be a long run-on sentence going over several psukim. The king said to his wise men, those that knew the times, right? Unclear exactly what that means. When that's used for Jews, it means those who are experts in astronomy, because they're the Sanhedrin who pick the when Rosh Chodesh is going to be. Probably not what it means here. But in any case, there's some sort of wise people. They may be astrologers, not clear. because this was the way of the king before all those who knew the law and the customs and the law, right? So on the one hand, they're Yodea Itim, on the other hand, they're Yodea Dat Vidin. They seem to be the same group. It doesn't say what it is, what the custom of the king is yet. It just says that he has this custom before them. Now it's going to tell us who they are. V'karov elav karshana, shatar, admata tarshish meres, marsena, mimuchan, shivat sarei paras, umadar efnei hamelech hayoshvim rishona ba'malchut. Okay, so we don't need to go through the names. It gives an order. The only thing that's significant here is the last one on the list, Memuchan. He's going to become the star in the rest of the story, and he's associated with Haman. It's another name for Haman, right? And the role that he plays here is very much in character with Haman. Okay, so these are the people these are his experts. Incidentally, we just said. Well, let's read the next verse, then I'll tell you. Kedat malasot be Malka Vashti. Again, the same order we just had, right? He asked them about the law or the custom, what to do with the queen Vashti, about that which she did not do, the statement of the king Achashverosh, through the hand of the ministers or the eunuchs. Another aside, by the way, right? We know that sometimes a melech is referring to God. There's a tradition, if it says Achashverosh, it's talking about Achashverosh, even though I have something to say about that, but I'm not going to say it till much later if I say it at all. But when it says melech without Achashverosh, it can be either Achashverosh or God. Keep that in mind as well. So here he wants to know what to do about this situation, right? Incidentally, one of the rabbis in the Gemara says we see one good thing about Achashverosh, that he takes counsel, right? He doesn't make decisions himself, but he understands that it makes sense to go to people who know more than you and to more than one person. They say about Ronald Reagan that he wasn't particularly intelligent, but he knew who to surround himself with. Anyway, let's see what he has to say. Vayomer Memuchan lifnei hamelech v'asarim lo al hamelech levado avta Vashti hamalka ki al kol hasarim v'al ha'amim asher bechol medinot hamelech Achashverosh. So Memuchan said in front of the king and the ministers. By the way, and if you notice, he's the seventh. Presumably the order is not random, right? He's the junior guy. He's the junior of this thing. So presumably he may well have an agenda of getting ahead in the world. He's number 7 of 7. Right? Granted, it's a elite club, but he's number 7 in that elite club of 7, right? So I think it's natural for him to want to move ahead, and he sees this as his big chance, right? So he says, right, it's not just against the king that Vashti, the queen, made a crime, but rather against all the ministers and all the peoples that are all the states of the king Achashverosh. Ki atzad dvar hamalka al kol hanashim livazot balehen beinehen be'omram hamelech Achashverosh amar la'avi et Vashti hamalka lefanav v'lo va'ah. So, because the word of the queen went out to all the women. I'm sorry, will go out. Right, the word of the queen will go out to all the women to disgrace their husbands in their eyes by saying that the king Achashverosh said to bring Vashti, the queen, in front of him, and she did not come. והיום הזה תאמרנה שרות פרס ומדי אשר שמעו את דבר המלכה לכל שרי המלך וכדאי ביזיון וקצף. Right, so he's building up the whole case of how serious this is, right? And this day, the women ministers, right, the wives, right, they're all going to be impressed, and they're going to speak. The wives that heard the word of the queen, right? Remember, they were with her in the party, right? The eunuchs went to the party to get her and said what the king had said, and she refused, presumably in front of all the women there. So there says Memuchan, they're going to they heard this thing. And they're going to say this back to their husbands, to the princes of the king, and there's going to be a great kedai, not like it's modern Hebrew, but it'll be like enough, a great deal of shame and anger, right? Because it's going to be a catastrophe. It's going to be a mess all over the kingdom. Right, women's liberation. It's going to be like a scandal. It's going to be terrible. Right, so Memuchan builds it up. It seems that this is pretty much right as it happens. So that means Achashverosh is still not in the best mental health right now to make a sound judgment. He listens to the advisors, but he's going to make the decision. Right, so if they give him bad advice. He's not in such a state to decide to discern. So, what does Memuchan say as far as the advice? Imal HaMelech Tov Yitzeh Deva Malchut Milefanav V'Yikatev B'Datei Paras U'Madai V'Lo Ya'avor Asher Lo Tavo Vashti Lefnei HaMelech Achashverosh U'Malchuta Yiten HaMelech Le'Reuta Tova Mimena. So, if it's good for the king, the word, meaning the decree of the king, should go out from before him and should be written in the laws of Persian media. And that law being that, v'lo yavor, and it shouldn't be nullified, that Vashti should not come before the king Achashverosh, and her crown, essentially, her queenness, will be given, the king should give her role to a neighbor, a friend that is better than her. So that's the decree. You'll notice it doesn't say anything about death, right? So it's we assume that she was killed, but it's not 100% clear from the text. What is clear is that she's ousted from the palace and that she loses her role as queen, right? He's urged to take someone that is better than her. So there's a lot to say over here. So one quick thing, I'm going to ask you a quick question, even though it would spend more than the 6 minutes left to us discussing it. So the first thing is, remember I said to you to be listening for phrases that remind us of other phrases. So Lereuta hatova mimena. Anybody have any idea what that's supposed to remind you of? I'll tell you with a phrase. Maybe see if anybody knows it. Lere'echa hatova mimeka. To your friend that's better than you. And it's a very similar case. It's speaking. It's when the Navi Shmuel speaks to Shaul. Right, Shaul has not listened to God, not killed Amalek. By the way, Amalek is hovering over here as the antecedent of Haman. So Shaul fails to do that. God says to Shmuel, you have to replace him. The words he replaces it with is God has decided to give the kingdom to your neighbor that's better than you. Basically, the exact same words, just in masculine, right? So that's a very fascinating thing. So my question to you now, before we finish the last couple of psukim, is you've seen Vashti being described. Okay, that's true. Elisheva wrote that Achash translate as silence or be quiet, which I think is very helpful because there's a lot of going along, like we said before, that he's doing the will of contradictory sarim, and here he's just going along with Memuchan, right? We say Saman anyway, but 100%, very good. So just you have 1 minute to see if you notice anything about how Vashti is being used. Malka Vashti, Vashti Malka, Vashti. Anything? So, not giving you much of a chance to answer. So the Malbim says that the way she's described originally, Vashti HaMalka says that she's first Vashti and then the queen, meaning that when she's mentioned that way, it's saying that she's underneath, right? She's first Vashti, meaning she's first Vashti to Achashverosh, and he has power over her. When she rebels, she becomes Hamalka Vashti. She's the queen. First she's the queen, and then she's Vashti. You'll notice that Memuchan tries to degrade her further by removing the title altogether and calling her Vashti a couple of times without neither Hamalka or Vashti Hamalka. So anyway, let's finish in the last 3 minutes that we have. I'm on Pasuk Chav, v'nishmam pitgam hamelech asher yaseh bechol malchuto ki rabba hi, v'kol nashim yitnu yakar levalehen lemigdol v'ad katan. And the word of the king will be heard, that it will be done in all of his kingdom, even though it's great. Right, you know the word ki can mean different things. V'chol, and all the women will give glory or honor to their husbands from the great to the least. Right, in other words, all levels. V'tava davar bein hamelech v'asarim v'yasa hamelech dvar memuchan. So the thing was good in the eyes of the king and the ministers, and the king did according to the words of Memuchan. Here might be a good, interesting thing to think of God as the Melech here, that God allows it to go on, especially as we saw in the Gra, that God is sort of pulling the strings to lead up to what needs to happen. Incidentally, you should note that the Sarim also, the 6 senior ministers, go along with Memuchan, right? So it seems to be, for whatever reasons, fairly unanimous. Chav bet, v'yishlach svarim el kol medinot hamelech el medina kekatva, vel am ve'am keloshono liot kol ish sorea beveito medabek lashon amo. So the books were sent out to all of the provinces of the king, to each and every city according to its script, and each people according to its language, that each man should be ruling in his house and speaking according to the language of his people. So there's a lot of humor in this. Again, this is parody. The Gemara says that had Achashverosh not sent out this decree, it would have been much more dangerous for the Jews when Haman sent out his decree. Meaning, Achashverosh became a much bigger laughingstock by sending the decree than by anything that Vashti did to him, right? Again, you have to think in ancient culture, the fact that one woman, even if she's a queen, right, refused to come in front of the king in very, again, according to our tradition, very bizarre and difficult circumstances, to say that that would set a precedent going against, basically, the way society was structured it's not even a long shot, right? So Memuchan is building this story for Achashverosh. Achashverosh buys it, and by buying it, say Chazal in the Gemara, he makes a complete fool of himself, right? People laugh at him and say, "What is this decree?" Right? You're allowed to force your wife to speak your language. Shkoyach. She has to give you honor. Oh, now that's going to change everything in the household, right? So again, you have to listen. I mean, one of the things I love about Purim and reading Megillat Esther is I always laugh because it's so funny. If you really get it, if you really see what's going on, it's tremendous parody. Anyway, okay. Great to see all of you, and hope to see you again next week in the next several weeks. And if there are any comments or questions, please send me a note. Take care. Bye.